Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So, very glad to welcome all of you to our third day of our Kartik Yatra 2021. And we continue touring and discussing the various pastime places of His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, especially commemorating his auspicious 125th appearance anniversary. And I would like to now invite His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj to kindly begin today's presentation. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Om Akyantimidandasya Gyananjana Chalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Bandeham Sri Guru Sri Judapatakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanda Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janaballabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamunathira Banachari Jamunathira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna. I welcome everyone to our Kolkata Kartik Yatra. I am very honored, very grateful, and very humbled to be in the presence of all of the assembled devotees. I thank you for extending your very precious time to be with us today. I am truly inspired and enlivened by the virtual tour that has been presented by the Yatra team. You have taken us to such precious holy places of Srila Prabhupada's early pastimes. Places that have such a deep and profound historical significance to our ISKCON community for all generations to come. I would like to extend my very deep gratitude to His Holiness Srila Satsvarup Goswami Maharaj, because so much of the information that has been spoken, studied, and revealed has come from the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Satsvarup Goswami Maharaj, one of the original disciples of Srila Prabhupada from 26 Second Avenue. In that little storefront, a few of those early devotees, they moved in with Srila Prabhupada. Satsvarup Maharaj was requested by Prabhupada to continue working so he could help to fund the preaching, which he did until Srila Prabhupada gave him the blessings to full-time dedicate his whole energy. He opened center in Boston. He established Library Party. He was editor of Back to Godhead magazine. He was often Srila Prabhupada's personal secretary, one of the original GBCs. In every way, he was just surrendered at Srila Prabhupada's side. And after Srila Prabhupada's departure from the world, the leaders of ISKCON desired that Srila Prabhupada's life story be presented in the form of a biography. Srila Prabhupada, he translated and gave us purports to the most important of all the Vedic literatures, the Ishopanishad, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and then the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. And Srila Prabhupada extracted knowledge from all the various Vedic literatures and the commentaries of the Acharyas. And sometimes in Srila Prabhupada's books, either in dedications or in purports, he would refer to his own life being the Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, the struggles he endured to spread this movement throughout the world. And very fondly, he would refer to his childhood and his meeting his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. In lectures, Srila Prabhupada gave us much information about those early years of his life. Personally, I become so inspired hearing Srila Prabhupada's lectures on the appearance days and disappearance days of his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. Not only does he express his love, his surrender, his gratitude to his Guru, but Srila Prabhupada would often tell his life story in brief summary of how events brought him to the loving association of Srila Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, and how Srila Prabhupada came to the point of boarding the Jaladuta in Calcutta and coming to the West. Srila Prabhupada would tell us that his only qualification was he is simply repeating the words of his Guru Maharaj without changing anything. Srila Prabhupada would give all credit to his Guru Maharaj for whatever accomplishments he had achieved. He would say, I am simply following the instruction of my spiritual master. And on one occasion in Los Angeles, on the disappearance day of his Guru Maharaj, he was thinking and speaking about his life and his service and the mercy he received. And Srila Prabhupada began to cry as he thanked all of his followers for assisting him in carrying out the order of his Guru Maharaj. Yesterday, the tour took us to the first preaching center of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, which is a small house with a ground floor and a first floor at 1 Ultadunga Junction Road. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, after he left Sri Mayapur Dham, the Sri Chaitanya Math, and came to Calcutta, there was only a few people who were there to help him. And 50 rupees a month to rent the building, which was a lot for them. It wasn't a lot as far as the times. It was very reasonable. But Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada was a sannyasi with no possessions. And the few people who were dedicated to him, you know, they had very simple jobs, or they were brahmacharis. And we spoke about this yesterday, and afterward, my worshipable God sister Mandakini Devi, she was making a connection that at Ultadunga Junction Road, it was like what 26 Second Avenue was to Srila Prabhupada in so many ways. And I truly appreciate, Mandakini Devi, that you have given us that wonderful insight. And it was there on the rooftop that Srila Prabhupada first met Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and received the instruction to take Lord Chaitanya's message to the whole world in the English language. At the time, Srila Prabhupada was just coming out of college. He was married. Just 1 year before, he had his first child. He wasn't really set financially to maintain his family yet. He was just, struggling to begin his career. And he's given this instruction. Who is Srila Prabhupada? These wonderful pastimes, Krishna puts his eternal associates from the spiritual world in very human conditions, with very human struggles, so that they could teach us by their example. Srila Prabhupada took that order as his life and soul on that rooftop in 1922. Srila Prabhupada said, I have, at that time, speaking to my guru, I accepted Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada as my spiritual master, not formally, but in my heart. And Srila Prabhupada surrendered his heart to the instruction he was given. It seemed so impossible. India was under British rule. There was so much politics going on in India, unbelievable politics and uprisings, during that era. Mahatma Gandhi, Subhash Chandra Bose, they were creating resistance to the British, and the British were creating artificial famines that were killing millions of people. The military was shooting innocent civilians down for protesting, killing them. There was so much difficulty. And for a common person at that time, to be even allowed to leave India, to be given visas to countries in the West, was practically an impossibility. But Srila Prabhupada was determined in his lifetime he would fulfill that order. At the same time, as a Vaishnav, he felt the need to be responsible and exemplary on behalf of his Guru Maharaj. At that time, most of his god brothers were sannyasis and brahmacharis. As a grihasta, he needed to represent his Guru Maharaj in a way that would give dignity and respect. So he worked and he raised a family. But the whole time, he was always trying to assist the mission of his Guru Maharaj. And in those grihasta years, when he would live in Calcutta, he was especially eager to assist his god brothers. In the house that he lived in, some years later, he had some rooms, apartments. It wasn't his own house. It was just a building, and he had some rooms in that building. And his family would be there, and he would keep some rooms as like a preaching base. His Divine Grace Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Maharaj, His Divine Grace Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj, these devotees would sometimes stay with Srila Prabhupada and they would preach together. So as Srila Prabhupada was taking care of his family and working, he would simultaneously be having kirtans, be giving lectures, and by organizing with his beloved God brothers to preach Lord Chaitanya's message and his Guru Maharaj's mission. During the time of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when Srila Prabhupada was in Mumbai working and the devotees were sent to begin a Gaudiya Math, they came to him for help, and Srila Prabhupada was giving kirtan, he was preaching, he was organizing programs, he was introducing sannyasi god brothers. And when Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur came to install the deities, just a few minutes walk from Radha Gopinath Temple was that Gaudiya Math. Srila Prabhupada got the building. He organized everything. the sannyasis and brahmacharis told Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada that Abhay Charanaravinda, he should be the president of our mat, of the temple. And Srila Prabhupada was always willing to surrender to whatever he was asked. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that let him continue what he is doing now. In due course of time, he will do everything. Srila Prabhupada took that as instruction. He continued as a grihasta. At a certain time, everything was taken away from him. The people he trusted for the business he created, they stole from him, they cheated him, they abandoned him, they totally betrayed him. In that very, very difficult situation, at that very difficult time, Srila Prabhupada taught us how to see through the eyes of Scripture. Yasya hamanagrinmayami harishita dhanam shanai. He quoted where Yudhisthira Maharaj was asking Krishna, how is it that we lost everything and were sent to the forest? And Krishna told him, when I am merciful to my devotee, I give them what they need. But when I'm very merciful, I take everything away so that the devotee has nothing and no one to turn to except me. And Srila Prabhupada did that. He made whatever arrangements were possible for his family, and he became a vanaprastha to fulfill the order of his guru. When you don't have any money, when you don't have any means, when you don't have any followers, how do you spread this movement all over the world? Any opportunity that came, he saw it as Krishna's blessing, however big or small. And in this way, Srila Prabhupada was always enthusiastic. Somehow, a small property in Jhansi was given in his care, and he created there the League of Devotees and tried to establish a worldwide movement there. He was making as many interconnections with influential people. He was preaching to common people. In every way, he was very much absorbed and back to Godhead, writing, publishing, distributing. He gave his heart for about a year there. And then it was all taken away. The owner of the property decided to give that land to someone else. Srila Prabhupada was kicked out. Again, he had nothing. He took that opportunity to go to Vrindavan. First the Bamsi Gopal temple, then Radha Damodar temple, where he would pray, he would chant, he would associate with his god brothers, Brijabasis and Goswamis. And he became more and more absorbed in writing and began the great historical, monumental service of bringing the Srimad Bhagavatam to the English language with the condensed, concentrated essence of the purports of all the acharyas. when people go to Vrindavan, often they go to enjoy the atmosphere, or they go to get away from the responsibilities of the world to retire. Srila Prabhupada's singular purpose of residing in Vrindavan was to prepare himself to carry out the order of his Guru Maharaj, to travel the world with the message of Lord Chaitanya. And now he would have the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam to bring with him. Srila Prabhupada took sannyas only for that purpose, to facilitate serving his Guru's mission. And when Srila Prabhupada came back to Calcutta and boarded that cargo ship, the MV Jaladuta, he was quite sickly at the time. Just about a week later, he had 2 heart attacks and severe seasickness. And he had to stay on that ship for 38 days until it reached New York. Srila Prabhupada would often remember Vrindavan and write about it in his diary. But he would also, share his beautiful experiences in Calcutta. As a child, tiny little child, being his parents, his mother and father would bring him to the Radha Govinda temple of the Mullock family. And seeing the love and devotion of his mother and father to Sri Sri Radha Govinda. Srila Prabhupada's hero when he was a child was the pujari. He wanted his own little Radha Govinda deities so he could, some little children, they like to be like movie actors or actresses, or they like to be like sports stars. But Srila Prabhupada, he just loved to do the things that he would see his mother and father and the pujari do in his offering artis and bhoga and chanting for his little Radha Govinda deities. Yes, Srila Prabhupada's fond memories of Calcutta. And as we have described over the last couple days, they were the main preaching bases of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Nityananda Prabhu. When Srila Prabhupada established 26 2nd Avenue, those early devotees that came to him and assisted him, they were happy days, they were struggling days. Srila Prabhupada gave such blessings. And we are forever grateful to each and every one of those devotees. They assisted Srila Prabhupada in those times of great need. Srila Prabhupada, before he began his writings, he was blessed by his Guru Maharaj. When Srila Prabhupada wrote that beautiful Vyas Puja offering for Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, his Guru Maharaj gave an instruction that whatever Abhay, whatever he writes, must be published. Such a blessing. And we find in the story of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami how he received the blessings of each and every devotee from their hearts before beginning Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. His Holiness Satsvarup Goswami Maharaj received the blessings of all the leading disciples of Srila Prabhupada to embark on this great service of writing Srila Prabhupada's Lilamrita. And with his small team of devotees, they traveled the world doing research, hundreds of interviews with devotees who had known Prabhupada, with Srila Prabhupada's family members, with Srila Prabhupada's beloved God brothers and God sisters, with Srila Prabhupada's business associates, the people at the press who helped him, with people who were his neighbors. It was such an incredible mission that was infused with such profound blessings. And Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita came out. I know at Sri Radha Gopinath Temple in Archopati, ISKCON ashram, for the past 35 years, every single day, practically without fail, during lunch prasad, when the whole ashram comes together, everyone's in complete silence taking prasad while hearing the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Because in hearing, we associate. The idea of Vani and Vapu was very much emphasized by Srila Prabhupada on behalf of all of our acharyas, that the physical presence of our gurus and the great saints is Vapu. And it has limitless value. It is absolutely precious. And it's so rare. It's so easy to take the most valuable things for granted. And the nature of the world and the psychology of a human being is we usually don't really come to grips with the value of something until it's gone. Srila Prabhupada's physical presence, during Srila Prabhupada's time in this world, I was just a very little devotee struggling to be the servant of the servant and trying to be obedient to the servant of the servants of Srila Prabhupada. So because of that, it was quite rare that I had the opportunity to physically be in the presence of Srila Prabhupada. But after he departed from the world, I think back and I wish I wasn't so obedient that to run wherever Srila Prabhupada was, to see him, to hear him, to learn from him. Yes, the Vaishnav community blessed Satsvarup Goswami. And the Vapu of Srila Prabhupada in 1977 was taken away from us by Sri Sri Radha Govinda. But what was at the heart of his Vapu during his pastimes in this world was his Vani, his instruction. By hearing his instructions and by following his instructions. That is really Vani. It's not just hearing. Shravana doesn't simply mean hearing. It means hearing in such a way that we take it so seriously, we follow what we hear. And in the Vani of Srila Prabhupada and all of our great acharyas is where the deepest experience of personal association is given to us by surrendering to the instructions. Vani means two things: hearing the instructions and hearing about the person. The Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna's instructions and also Krishna's pastimes. So in all of Srila Prabhupada's books, Srila Prabhupada's personal presence is being given to us fully in his instructions. Yayatamam prapatyante tams tataiva bhajamyaham. According to how we surrender to those instructions, we will actually be in the presence of Srila Prabhupada. One time a devotee was asking Srila Prabhupada if he could leave his services just to follow Prabhupada around. And Srila Prabhupada said, "Who is the closest person to me right now, physically?" And then Prabhupada pointed to a fly. It was on his forehead, I believed. And Srila Prabhupada said, "He's so close to me physically, but he's causing me disturbance." Real closeness, samsiddhir haritoshanam, is how we please our spiritual master. Yasya prasadad bhagavat prasaro, yasya prasada nagati kutopi. In pleasing Srila Prabhupada, we please Krishna. Sometimes there were devotees who were Prabhupada's personal secretaries that he would send to very, very remote, dangerous parts of the world. And actually, in striving to please Srila Prabhupada in that way, they were even closer to Prabhupada. So when the devotees are taking prasad, it's a time of the day when we're nourished. At Radha Gopinath Temple, the devotees have really tried to be instruments of Srila Prabhupada's mercy as they cook prasad, to make preparations that are authentic, that are very satisfying to the mind, the heart, and the body, and also, as far as possible, very nourishing. Amrita. Amrita means it means immortal, but it also means like nourishment. And as they're nourishing their bodies with Sri Radha Gopinath's Mahaprasad, through their ears they are eating and being nourished with faith in Srila Prabhupada by hearing his glorious pastimes, by hearing his glorious example in every type of situation. And many devotees, Hari Sari Prabhu, Yamuna Devi, Shama Sundar Prabhu, and Mukunda Goswami Maharaj, many have written these wonderful Burijan Prabhu, wonderful narrations of their experiences with Srila Prabhupada. And they are like Vani in the sense that we are, through hearing the instructions, we are receiving the Vapu, the personal physical association of Srila Prabhupada as he shared it with these great devotees. Much of the yatra this year is based on these biographies of Srila Prabhupada. And, from the seeds of some of these beautiful stories, our devotees have done research to find the places and to go deeper into, various insights. Another person who revealed Srila Prabhupada in a most glorious way to the world was his empowered, illustrious disciple, who was also born and raised in Kolkata, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. When he was only a devotee for a few months, Srila Prabhupada initiated him. He gave him first initiation, second initiation. And soon after, he gave him sannyas. The first service that Srila Prabhupada personally gave to him was to be his personal secretary, to do all the correspondence for India. And then Srila Prabhupada gave him the instruction to translate all of Srila Prabhupada's books into the Bengali language. How historical. Because our culture is coming from the Bengali language. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, the Panchatattva, they were all from East Bengal and West Bengal and Orissa. The native tongue language of Srila Prabhupada and his guru and his guru and his guru was all Bengali. The Sri Chaitanya Bhagavad, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so many of the wonderful literatures and songs and bhajans. On the order of his Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada translated the most important Vaishnava literatures into English. And Srila Prabhupada entrusted every one of his books to Bhakti Charu Maharaj for Bengali. And tirelessly for years, he took that order as his life and soul and fulfilled it. What to speak of his most wonderful kirtans, his wonderful lectures. His entire life was to express his gratitude to Srila Prabhupada. Even though he was relatively new to our movement, Srila Prabhupada kept him with him as his personal assistant. Even through the last year and the last months and the last moments of Srila Prabhupada's pastimes in the world. Whoever Srila Prabhupada kept with him, and whoever Srila Prabhupada spoke to, it was his expectation that we would imbibe that with our heart and soul and share it with the world. In many ways, when Srila Prabhupada would smile upon someone or speak to someone or engage them in service, Srila Prabhupada was actually giving those people himself. And along with that, giving them the responsibility to share Srila Prabhupada that example, that presence with the world. And that is why it is so beautiful that there are many devotees writing their memories of Srila Prabhupada and sharing them today. And of course, we have our beloved godbrother, Siddhanta Prabhu, who in the Prabhupada memories, he's interviewed so many people, and such treasure house. Our beloved god sister Mula Prakriti wrote a beautiful book, and it's on and on. Devotees are becoming inspired and empowered. When Srila Prabhupada was sometimes asked, "How can we repay you for all that you're giving us?" Srila Prabhupada would sometimes say, "Whatever I'm giving you, receive it and share it with others." And we all have that opportunity when we personally directly hear from Srila Prabhupada reading his books, when we personally directly hear from Srila Prabhupada by listening to his recordings, when we personally connect with Srila Prabhupada, when we come before his deities, his murtis in a prayerful mood, and when we hear about Srila Prabhupada's life and his example through the memories and experiences of his disciples, and whoever repeats that, the same effect is there. To follow what Srila Prabhupada has given us and to share his message and his blessings and his presence with others. In that way, Vani is eternal. The eternal soul never dies, and Krishna is forever in our hearts. And Srila Prabhupada is the founder, Acharya, Guru of our movement, is the representative of Krishna in our heart. By hearing sincerely and by really trying to follow, we are forever with Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada is forever with us. And however many generations pass, that truth remains exactly the same. Wherever parampara is preserved, the blessings of the great gurus of the past does not diminish, but rather it is embellished. It is expanding, because that is the nature of everything in the spiritual world, and everything connected to Krishna is it's ever expanding. So simply we must preserve that original message and that original spirit of devotion that Srila Prabhupada embodied. His compassion is all that we're made out of. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, after completing all these books, after traveling the world and preaching, he wanted to just keep expanding the world's connection to Srila Prabhupada and that awareness. And being such a cultured, artistic person, he created that Abhay series, Abhay Charan, where in India, it was a popular national television show. Simply revealing the story of Prabhupada's life. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, perhaps better than any devotee in ISKCON, he knew Kolkata because he was born and raised there. And how much he helped our temple there over the years. What a historical place that little temple is on Albert Road. I believe it was the first temple Srila Prabhupada established in India. At the time, it was just one floor on his 2-story building. It was shared. Srila Prabhupada established Radha Govinda deities he installed, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The same format that was so popular to the Gaudiya Math and that was established by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Radha Krishna and Lord Gauranga Mahaprabhu. And he established Radha Madhav in the same way with Mahaprabhu in Mayapur. Although throughout the world he established Radha Krishna with Gaurnitai deities. Because for all the world, the mercy of Lord Nityananda was so essential, and the recognition of that mercy. Yes, how much preaching he did there. And a historical event when His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, he went to Mayapur under Prabhupada's instruction. Srila Prabhupada even gave him rupees to procure a property, the first property of ISKCON in Mayapur, a little abandoned paddy field with nothing on it. It was a struggle. Many people tried, but everyone failed. There was so much opposition. But Srila Prabhupada, he had such trust in Tamal Krishna Goswami's surrender and his incredible determination and enthusiasm and intelligence. And Srila Prabhupada stayed up till very late at night just waiting. And in the darkness of the middle of the night, Tamal Krishna Goswami came to that little room at Albert Road where Srila Prabhupada was sitting. And he handed Srila Prabhupada the deed and said, Srila Prabhupada, the property in Sri Mayapur Dham is now yours. The seed of an idea was in Srila Prabhupada's heart for decades before to have an international center in Mayapur. And on this day in Calcutta, in the Radha Govinda Temple in Mahaprabhu at Albert Road, that seed began to sprout from the soil. And we see how it has become like an enormous desire tree with so many branches and thousands of people living all over the world. And the TOVP is getting close to completion. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj he also heard from Srila Prabhupada how much Srila Prabhupada wanted a center in Panihati. Because Panihati and nearby Kardaha are both considered parts of Kolkata. I was reflecting yesterday how Bhakti Charu Maharaj once I'm becoming very speechless thinking about him and separation. Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj is one of the dear most worshipable God brothers, friends, and well-wishers that I've ever had in my spiritual life. Srila Prabhupada's mercy flowed through his heart in such a special way. And when Bhakti Charu Maharaj wanted to, when he wanted to do a service for someone in a very traditional Gaudiya Bengali spirit, he would be very insistent, humble but insistent that you accept that service. And I had many such pleasurable and sometimes challenging encounters with him when he would be very insistent to accept service, to insistent that we accept his service. Sometimes he would practically force me to stay in the room with him in Mayapur for many years whenever I came to Mayapur, because really I hardly had anywhere else to stay in those days. I was kind of like a homeless person. He would love to insist that we come to take the prasad that he and his disciples would cook, which was just nectar. It was like when Chaitanya Das and Malini and his devotees would cook Bengali prasad, really we were like taking a voyage into the home of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, where Sachimata was cooking for him. And one time he was insisting that I go on a boat with him to Panihati. He said, it's very close. It's a part of Calcutta. Srila Prabhupada wanted so much a center in Panihati. And he told me that when Srila Prabhupada was young, a child, and even when he was growing up in Calcutta, and even as a young man, they would often go to Panihati and the Kardaha area. It was like a place that was an area of Calcutta that was very quiet and very holy, and right on the banks of Mother Ganga. Yes, Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj said Prabhupada wanted a project there. And when the opportunity came for him, he developed a beautiful project, a place for some devotees to stay, an ashram, outreach for preaching to the local areas, and a wonderful temple, and especially just made the area of the Ganga such a beautiful place to take shelter and bathe. And there was a beautiful lesson in his insistence that he worked hard to develop something for Srila Prabhupada, and he wanted to share it with his God brothers and God sisters. He wanted to share it with all the devotees in our movement. And this is a very precious nature of a true Vaishnav. Without ego. Materialistic people, sometimes they like to show their accomplishments because they want people's recognition. They want people to think that they're great, or they want to get something from someone. either subtle or gross. But for a devotee, nothing is ours. Srila Prabhupada taught that everything he did was only by the mercy of his spiritual master. So if we're really in that spirit that Prabhupada taught us, nothing we say and nothing we do is ours. Srila Prabhupada, with such humility, he would say, I am simply the postal peon, which in American language means the mailman. I'm simply delivering the message. The postal peon or the mailman, the message he's delivering is not his. And the message he's receiving, he cannot keep. He's a transparent via medium. And that's what a true Vaishnava is, a transparent via medium. In a world where success is so much calculated by how we inflate our false ego, this is contradictory psychology. Trinadapi sunichena taror iva sehishnuna amani namanadena kirtaniya sadahari. To be humble like a blade of grass, tolerant, forgiving, caring like a tree. To find joy in offering honor to others and expecting none for oneself. These qualities, when we aspire for them and when we cultivate them, we please Krishna. Kirtaniya Sadhari. And when we please Krishna, Krishna gives us a taste of the sweetness of the holy names. A good kirtan singer is not simply one who has a melodious voice or is expert at musical composition or raga, but rather one who has these qualities of Trinadapi Sunichena, because Krishna's presence manifests in his name. Srimati Radharani's presence manifests in her name when we chant with such humility and such an inspiration to serve. So when a devotee accomplishes something, they don't want to show it off. Of course, that tendency is there, but we need to pray to transcend that. When we really are truly in the mood of service, then what we accomplish, we see that it belongs to my Guru. And the credit of it belongs to my Guru. And because it is the glory of my Guru, I want to share it with others. I just want to share Prabhupada's mercy with others. Srila Prabhupada allowed us to do this, so we want to share it with others. And in this way, when devotees work hard and give their lives, they want to please the Vaishnavas. So he was very much insisting, come, I've arranged a special private boat just for you and a few followers. And we'll go together, we'll have kirtan and go to Panihati. He made that arrangement in such a personal way. And we went to a particular ghat on the river Ganges, and boarded this little motorboat. And it was a nice boat, actually. I think there was probably about 15 devotees on it. And he, even though it was a short ride, he just had he had prasad on the boat. There was kirtan on the boat. Everything was there. And it was so intimate, just flowing. And Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj and myself mainly sat together. And as the Mother Ganga was splashing in all directions around us as the boat was moving, I was just listening to him remember Srila Prabhupada. And we came to Panihati. Panihati is such an important place that reveals Guru Tattva. And previous to this presentation, for those who saw the tour, a major part of the tour was taped video recordings of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj on the bank of Mother Ganga in Panihati, speaking of the glories of Srila Prabhupada in Panihati. I would like to speak a few words about the history of this holy place. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was living in Jagannath Puri, after his South Indian tour, he was in Jagannath Puri, sitting in a secluded place, all alone with Lord Nityananda Prabhu. And Nityananda Prabhu was given an instruction. Thinking of Nityananda Prabhu, I'm going to divert because I'm seeing my beloved godbrother Upananda Prabhu in Bhuvaneshwar. And there was a very similar loving exchange between Srila Prabhupada and His Holiness Srila Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj. Gaur Govinda Maharaj is from Orissa, born and raised in Vaishnav family. Just from his earliest childhood, his deepest joy in life was kirtan and hari katha. And his love for Srila Prabhupada and his love for Radha Govinda was so deep, and he made bhakti, prema bhakti, so tangible to whoever he came in contact with because he embodied it so much. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spent the last 24 years of his pastimes residing in Jagannath Puri. The first 6 years he traveled to South India, sometimes in Vrindavan, in Bengal, but he based in Puri. And for the next 18 years, he practically never left. And for the last 12 years in the Gambhira, he was diving so deeply in the loving ecstatic moods of Sri Radharani's separation from Krishna, in the presence of Ramananda Rai and Swarup Damodar Goswami. His Holiness Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj has revealed these pastimes so beautifully through his lectures, through his books, through his life. He's from Orissa, very close to Jagannath Puri. Srila Prabhupada requested Gaur Govinda Maharaj to translate all his books in the Oriyan language, Odisha language. and to develop a center and build a temple in Bhuvaneshwar. And I remember when I first met him, I believe it was 1980, I think it was 1983. And he was living in just a little straw hut. And he was constantly, day and night, he didn't even have electricity. He had a little kerosene lantern, a little oil lamp that he would keep on his desk in the dark, and he would be translating Srila Prabhupada's books in the language of Odisha. And it's one of the poorest states of India financially, but one of the richest spiritually and culturally. With tears of joy, he expressed to us how grateful he was that he could be in the little straw shack that Srila Prabhupada stayed in when he came to visit him in Bhuvaneshwar. Srila Prabhupada in 1977, I believe, he came to Bhuvaneshwar just to meet Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj. I think Prabhupada gave him first, second, and sannyas practically at the same time. Prabhupada trusted him so much and entrusted the state of Orissa to him. And how much Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj would glorify the pastimes of Lord Nityananda Prabhu. Narottam Das Thakur, who was from Bengal, Khetri Gram, in his beautiful song, Nitai Padakamala Koti Chandra Shushitala, he writes that only by the mercy of Lord Nityananda Prabhu can one enter into the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And that is a very deep subject in itself. Panihati is such a special place because it represents this principle in so many ways. When Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda was sitting together alone under that tree in Jagannath Puri, Lord Chaitanya said that you are happily with me here in Puri. Because of my mother's request, I am staying here now. But the people of Bengal, who are so dear, they are suffering. If you are just remaining here like a gentle sage, how will they hear about Krishna? How will they taste the sweetness of love for Krishna? Go to Bengal. Do not even return here to Puri. Just go to Bengal and spread devotional service, Krishna consciousness to everyone, everywhere, without discriminating of who is fit and who is unfit. Lord Chaitanya also entrusted some of his very close associates to go with Lord Nityananda. And Lord Nityananda Prabhu took that instruction as his life and soul. And he infused all his devotees to do the same. It is described in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And stories like this, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami encourage us to go deeper into the details in the Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat by Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, who he declares to be the incarnation of Vyasadeva for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. So there it is described, Lord Nityananda Prabhu, along with Abhiram Das and Gadadhar Das and Purandar Das and so many of these great devotees, they all began their journey. Lord Nityananda Prabhu induced them to start kirtan. As they were having Nama Sankirtan, Nagar Sankirtan on the roads, they were so totally intoxicated with love for Krishna and enthusiasm to share Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message with everyone. They lost awareness of all considerations of this material world. From Jagannath Puri, Bengal is the northern direction. They began going north toward Bengal, and intoxicated by the holy name, they were moving very rapidly in the southern direction. And somebody passing by in the road, they asked, "Where is Mother Ganga in Bengal?" And the person said, "Hi, what is this? You are going the wrong direction. It is north. You are going south. You must just to get back to the proper road that leads. It's 6 hours in the opposite direction from where you're going. To get back to where they started." And they went back to the proper road, and they were having kirtan, and they were chanting again. And they asked someone, "Which way is Mother Ganga?" And they said, "Hi, what you are 20 miles off the proper road, going in the wrong direction." It is described that they were so absorbed in the pastimes of Vrindavan as they were chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra that Ramdas, Abhiram Das, he entered into the state of a cowherd boy. In Krishna's Leela, he's Sri Dama, Srimati Radharani's brother. And Abhiram Das stood right in the center of the road in the meditation of a cowherd boy. And he stood in a threefold bending form with his hands as if he was holding a flute. He did not move for 9 hours. And meanwhile, none of the devotees were impatient, saying, "Ramdas, come on, we have to go." They just had their kirtan around him for the next 9 hours, loudly chanting the Maha Mantra, the holy names of Krishna. And sometimes Gadadhar Das, who is actually an incarnation of Srimati Radharani's effulgence, he would be in the mood of a gopi and just, pick up a clay pot and he would be offering people, "Would you like some yogurt? Would you like some butter?" What type of kirtan this was. They had no idea whatsoever what direction they were going. They were simply chanting. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur describes somehow or other they arrived on the bank of the Ganga in Bengal, right at the house of Raghava Pandit. Raghava Pandit and his beloved sister Damayanti, they would cook bhoga with such love and devotion. Kaviraj Goswami describes in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that whenever they cooked, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally was always there. Actually, physically, he would be there, but he was just not perceivable. Whenever there was kirtan at the house of Srivas Thakur, whenever Nityananda Prabhu danced, whenever Sachimata cooked, and whenever Damayanti and Raghava Pandit offered bhoga, those were 4 places Lord Chaitanya would specially manifest. So when they arrived at Raghava Pandit's, this wonderful kirtan party, Lord Nityananda Prabhu desired to dance. He called upon 3 of his favorite most kirtan singers. When these 3 brothers would sing kirtan, they would manifest Vrindavan directly and the pastimes of Vrindavan in the hearts of all of the devotees. Nityananda Prabhu gazed upon the great Madhava Ghosh and told him to begin Sankirtan. Madhava Ghosh was joined by his 2 brothers, Govinda Ghosh and Vasudev Ghosh. Together they sang in such a way that Nityananda Prabhu, as he danced, he was swooning in ecstatic love for Krishna. And Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Narottam Das Thakur sings, Brajendra Nandana Jai Sachi Shuta Hoilo Se Balarama Hoilo Nitai. That Krishna has appeared as Mahaprabhu and Balaram has appeared as Nityananda Prabhu. And there's always also very detailed descriptions of the tattva of Nityananda Prabhu. He's the original expansion of Krishna. And it is Balaram who expands as the Chaturbhyuha of Vasudeva, Aniruddha, Prajumana, and and then they expand as Narayan. And then they expand as Shankarshan. And from Shankarshan, Mahavishnu. Karanadakshayi Vishnu. Karanadakshayi Vishnu is an expansion of an expansion of an expansion of an expansion of Nityananda Prabhu Balaram. And we know how Mahavishnu, by his mere, through the pores of his body, all the universes manifest. And by the power of his glance, he impregnates the Mahatattva, Mother Nature, with all the living entities, all the jivatmas that are karmically bound to be in material existence. With one glance, he impregnates the power of the Lord's glance. And Nityananda Prabhu, who gives all those powers of glancing to Mahavishnu, what was the power of his glance? He impregnated the supreme Shakti of love into the hearts of his devotees through his glance. Nitya Ananda. Lord Nityananda's name reveals that he's eternally in ecstasy, Ananda. And what is his ecstasy? Prema. Lord Sri Balaram, his ecstasy is in making Krishna happy, in creating an abode and every type of pastime to support it, to facilitate Krishna's enjoying of Radharani and the devotees. And Lord Nityananda, Parama Karuna Pahundu Ijana Nitai Gora Chandra. Mahavishnu impregnated material nature with all living entities with his glance. And Nityananda Prabhu's, his glance was to share the ecstasy of his love for Krishna and love for Lord Chaitanya, who is Radha and Krishna, to share that and infuse that in the hearts of the living entities. And he who created everyone in this world, when he went out to preach, he did not discriminate who's fit or unfit. He saw everyone potentially as a lover of Krishna. The subordinate creator of the universe is Lord Brahma. And Nityananda Prabhu's preaching partner in the Navadvip Leela was Lord Brahma, who came in the form of Haridas Thakur, where their own children, the manifestations of their own potencies, he's begging them to be happy. It was so much in that mood of Lord Nityananda that Srila Prabhupada traveled the world. In the Jaladuta prayers, Prabhupada, he signs it, you're insignificant beggar. Srila Prabhupada identified himself as an insignificant beggar, begging for Krishna's mercy, begging for Radharani's supreme grace, begging for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's empowerment, begging for his guru's kindness. And then he traveled the world, house to house, state to state, country to country, continent to continent, begging people to accept the happiness of Krishna consciousness. Insignificant beggar. The profound glory of that statement is impossible to grasp. It is so exalted. What it means in that spirit to be an insignificant beggar, begging to receive and begging to give. And Srila Prabhupada gave us a chance in Parampara to be insignificant beggars too. If we understand what Vaishnav culture truly is. So here in Panihati, at the house of Raghava Pandit, Nityananda Prabhu, with his all-powerful glance, was infusing everyone in the kirtan with his ecstasies of love for Krishna. And the kirtan devotees spontaneously, in the purest state of realization, they were crying and they were chanting and it was incredible. As Lord Nityananda danced with them. Sometimes he would watch them dance and then he would dance. At a certain point, Sri Nityananda Prabhu went on the altar of Raghava Pandit and Damayanti and sat on the throne where the deities would sit. And Lord Nityananda Prabhu, he was so intoxicated in a state of giving ecstatic love for Krishna, that he said he wanted everyone to enjoy to their heart's content. And he knew what was in everyone's hearts. And transcendental to any egos or any material conceptions, he was totally in the mood of a cowherd boy with his friends in the spiritual world of Vrindavan. And he said, Abhishek. And the devotees all brought Ganges water and all sorts of other holy substances and offered a beautiful bathing ceremony of Nityananda Prabhu in Panihati. Then they dried him, they made offerings to him, they decorated him with ornaments, and then by his will, they decorated themselves with ornaments. And in that state, Nityananda Prabhu turned to Raghava Pandit and said, I am a cowherd boy, and I live in Vrindavan, and I'm with my cowherd boy friends now. I love Kadamba flowers. Please give me a garland of Kadamba flowers. Raghava Pandit was perplexed because in Bengal, there are Kadamba trees, but they only give flowers in a particular season. And this was not the season. He explained to Nityananda Prabhu, it's not the season for flowers. Nityananda Prabhu replied with a smile, go into your garden and see. You might find some Kadamba flowers. Raghava Pandit entered the garden. He was amazed. He saw this simple, humble lime tree covered with hundreds of fully blossomed, fragrant Kadamba flowers. The fragrance permeated all directions for miles. It was so sweet. Raghava Pandit made a garland and came and placed it on Nityananda Prabhu. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur says, anyone who smelled the fragrance of any one of those flowers, what to speak of touch those flowers, would be liberated from all material sufferings forever. Sri Nityananda Prabhu then turned to the devotees as they were chanting. He stopped the kirtan for a moment, and in a very mystical way, he said, what is the fragrance that you're experiencing now? And the devotees realized something that was supernatural, something that was impossible. They said, we are smelling an overpowering, nectarine, sweet fragrance of Damanaka flowers. But Damanaka flowers don't grow in Bengal. They grow in certain places of Orissa, near Puri. Nityananda Prabhu inquired from the devotees, do you know where that fragrance of Damanaka flowers is coming from? And everyone was silent. Nityananda Prabhu said, I will now reveal to you the secret of the Damanaka flowers that we're experiencing. He said, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is so pleased by your chanting of the holy names, and he's so pleased with your dancing that he personally came here and is here. He came from Puri to Panihati and has assumed the form of a tree. And all of Lord Chaitanya's limbs are fragrant with Damanaka flowers. He is so pleased. He's come to hear your singing and to watch your dancing. And Nityananda Prabhu then inspired the kirtan to continue. And this all-powerful, all-merciful glance became his pastime. He glanced at some devotees, and they became so transcendently infused with the happiness of his love that they danced up a high tree, and they began to dance on the branches of the tree. Devotees were ecstatically dancing on the tenderest, farthest branches of a tree. Those little branches that are so thin that when a breeze comes, they shake everywhere. They were dancing. And some of the devotees went way, way, way up to the top of these high trees, and they would call out, "I am a cowherd boy," and jump. They would say, "Hari, Hari," and jump from the top of the tree onto the ground and continue dancing. I guess we can call this the glance dance. Nityananda Prabhu glanced at another devotee and he fainted. And then by the power of Nityananda Prabhu, a wonderful pastime, everyone that he glanced upon would faint in overwhelming ecstasy. And when he directed his glance across the courtyard, all the devotees were one by one falling unconscious. Vrindavan Das Thakur gives the comparison like a garden of banana trees, all one by one being forced to the ground by a hurricane, the hurricane of the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu, that all-powerful, irresistible hurricane. In this way, they danced and they chanted in this kirtan without eating, without stopping for a moment to drink. They did not sleep for 3 continuous months. They were totally rested, totally nourished, and totally inspired with Nityananda, the eternal ecstasy of Lord Nityananda Prabhu's mercy. After this 3-month kirtan, Nityananda Prabhu brought his devotees to share this great wealth of joy with the villages. And wherever they went, whoever they met, these people were becoming completely transformed. In one area, just in the outskirts of a village, there were very small children, perhaps 3, 4, 5 years old. These little children were playing, and Nityananda Prabhu glanced upon them. And with such a loving, compassionate heart and a smile on his lips, he said, "Chant Hari Hari." And these children began to chant Hari Hari. Chanting the names of Krishna, they became so empowered. They were jumping. What were they empowered by? They were empowered by the love of Vrindavan that Nityananda Prabhu was distributing. These children began to roar like lions. As they were dancing, they were just feeling so affectionate for all living beings, but in such an unworldly condition they would put their arms around a tree while they're dancing, and the entire tree was uprooted, and the children were dancing with large trees holding. We can understand that those trees were liberated. I'm sure they went back to Godhead in the presence of Lord Nityananda Prabhu and the kirtan of his devotees. What a way to go. Sometimes the children, 5 or 7 betel nut trees, they would hold all of them together and be dancing. They became extremely powerful, and their roar was reverberating in all directions. The parents and the people of the village, when they would see this, they didn't try to stop their children. Their children became like their gurus. They just became completely mesmerized by the ecstatic love that Lord Nityananda had given to their children. And Lord Nityananda Prabhu, in the presence of those little 5-year-old children, he became just like one of them. And he danced with them, and he sang with them, and he performed pastimes among them. These children, they did not eat or drink. They did not take a moment of rest. Their kirtan continued without stop for 1 full month. And with every moment, they were becoming more and more empowered. This is the nature of Lord Nityananda Prabhu's mercy. I'll give one more little example that's explained in this section of the Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, that close to Panihati is the village where Gadadhar Das, who was one of those devotees who was infused by the glance of mercy of Nityananda Prabhu. And in his village, there was a very powerful, hateful, evil Qazi that had control over the military and the police. He was the ruler. And he hated anyone who had a different religion than himself. It was outlawed that anyone could publicly present any religion other than his own. It is described that this Qazi was so mean and he was so sinful that pious people, if a breeze that touched him or his shadow touched him, they would desperately run and jump in the Ganges to purify themselves. Nobody could even say his name. They were so afraid of him. He was so violent. Nityananda Prabhu's associate, infused by his loving glance, he ran right into the house of the Qazi at midnight when the Qazi was sleeping. He ran right in his house and screamed out very loudly, "Qazi, Qazi, you are a very sinful person. I am calling out to you. Chant the name of Krishna." Now, Qazi's house was filled with guards and soldiers. And Gadadhar was so intoxicated with compassion, they didn't know what to do with him. They were just standing there like, what is this and who is this? Ordinarily, they would kill anyone instantly. And Gadadhar Das saw these soldiers standing before him with weapons, just not knowing what to do. And Gadadhar, he yelled even louder, "Qazi, if you don't come and chant the name of Krishna, I will chop your head off." The Qazi heard this. Gadadhar Das set a blazing fire of wrath, anger in the Qazi's mind. He screamed and he ran down to kill this rascal. When the Qazi came down, he saw Gadadhar, he was gazing at him. Nityananda Prabhu had impregnated him with so much mercy. The Qazi didn't know what to do. Gadadhar just looked so gentle, such a well-wisher. The Qazi said, Gadadhar, it's the middle of the night. Why have you come to my house and caused such a disturbance? And Gadadhar said, because I have a message. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has incarnated in this world in the form of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. And they are giving ecstatic love of God freely to those who chant the names Hari Hari. I have come to invite you. Everybody around is chanting Hari Hari and happiness except you, Qazi. I have come to request you to chant the names Hari Hari. Qazi looked at him and he said, Gadadhar, it's the middle of the night. Just go home. And tomorrow I'll say Hari. As soon as he said that, Gadadhar began to dance. He said, why are you saying tomorrow? You just said the name Hari. Now you are freed of all your sins. You are liberated of all your material bondage. You have chanted the name Hari. And in this way, Gadadhar was dancing, celebrating in the house of the Qazi. This was the type of enthusiasm, the type of fearless preaching that was established by Nityananda Prabhu. And his base was Panihati and Kardaha. Nityananda Prabhu was one day sitting under a beautiful banyan tree on the banks of the Ganga in Panihati with his loving associates. And that is when Radhanath Swami came to meet him. Just earlier today, we heard that wonderful recording of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj telling this pastime right in the very place where it is eternally manifesting. Radhanath Das Goswami, in very brief, Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj explained he was a multi-millionaire. He was the only heir of his father and uncle's enormous wealth. But he wanted to leave it all behind because he wanted to surrender his whole life in assisting Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in so many ways and so many times, he tried to escape from his home. But his parents, they had at all times 12 guards watching him. He couldn't escape. Every time he'd go away, they'd bring him back. He had no material attachments. And at a certain time, with his guards and his father's representatives, he went to meet Lord Chaitanya in Shantipur. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told him that do not be a Markata Vairagya, a monkey renunciate. Go back home and perform your duties very carefully, very exemplary. And when Krishna gives his mercy to you, then you will come. So Radhanath Das Goswami went back and tried to do that. when he heard Nityananda Prabhu was in Panihati, with his father's permission, he went there, surrounded by guards. And as Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj so beautifully explained, and Prabhupada writes in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, from a distance, he felt himself so unqualified in the presence of so many great devotees. From a distance, he offered his obeisances. Nityananda Prabhu, he said, "You are a thief. Please come here. I will punish you." And Bhakti Charu Maharaj gave such a beautiful insight of the idea of a thief, because he was trying to approach Lord Chaitanya directly. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasada. We approach through our guru. It's not a material consideration, it's Krishna's arrangement. And Nityananda Prabhu is the original guru. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu entrusted the supreme treasure house of love of God in the hands of Nityananda Prabhu. And we can't get that treasure directly from Krishna or Lord Chaitanya, but we must receive it from whom Radharani, Krishna, and Mahaprabhu have entrusted it to. So that love of God is Nityananda Prabhu's property. And by trying to go directly to Lord Chaitanya, he was trying to steal that property. So Nityananda Prabhu gave him the atonement. Feed all my devotees with chira dahi, chipped rice and yogurt. And Radhanath Das Goswami, along with his assistants, he engaged them all. The people who came to guard him and to drag him back home, Radhanath Das Goswami engaged them all in assisting Lord Nityananda. They were buying yogurt, and they were buying condensed milk, and they were buying chira, and they were buying special bananas, and they were buying fruits and sweets and cakes and everything. And they were making big clay barrels and soaking the chipped rice in the yogurt and in another batch in the condensed milk. And it became so glorious as he was serving out. Soon all the devotees around and all the villagers heard. And the entire riverbank was filled with thousands of people. And there were so many people that they couldn't fit in the riverbank. They were standing in the current of the Ganga, and each person had 2 clay cups, one with chipped rice soaked with yogurt and sugar and bananas, and the other with condensed milk and ghee and special bananas and camphor. And in this way, they were all having this Chiradahi Utsav. And Raghava Pandit came and told Nityananda Prabhu that I invited you to my ashram, my home, for lunch, and now you're eating here. Nityananda Prabhu said, I'm a cowherd boy. I like to sit on the bank of the river under a tree with my friends and take prasad. I will come to your house tonight and we will have kirtan. The next day, Raghava Pandit, the next day, Radhanath Das Goswami was so humble. Raghunath Pandit brought him before Nityananda Prabhu. And Raghunath Das Goswami was just praying from the core of his heart that he could be engaged in the loving service of the Lord and his devotees. And it was at that place, on the bank of the Ganga in Panihati, that Nityananda Prabhu blessed him. He said, your feast was so wonderful. I enjoyed it so much that I called Lord Chaitanya to come here. Only myself and a few others could actually see him. but he came here and he was taking prasad under this tree on the bank of the river with me. Because Lord Chaitanya was so pleased with your service. And because all the devotees, the Vaishnavas, and all the common people are so happy, you will be blessed. Go to each Vaishnav and receive their blessings. Radhanath Das Goswami went to each and every devotee and bowed at their feet and begged for blessings with tears of sincerity. And he asked, and he received. And he came back to Lord Nityananda Prabhu, and Lord Nityananda said, because you pleased Lord Chaitanya by this feast, and because you have received the blessings of each devotee, I give you my blessing that very soon you will be liberated from all the bondage of all material connections in life. You will be a constant associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri. Lord Chaitanya will put you in the charge of his own personal secretary, Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami Maharaj. Now you go home and the time will soon come. Radhanath Das Goswami became our Prayojana Acharya, the person who Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu especially inspired to reveal the highest level of the gopis' love for Krishna. Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. Prayojana is the sweetness of the love of the gopis. It was by the mercy of Nityananda in Panihati, which represents Guru Tattva, that this took place. And very close to Panihati is Kardaha, which was actually the place where Lord Nityananda, along with his two wives, Janava and Vasudha, resided. And as Ananga Mohan Prabhu so beautifully explained, Vasudha had two children from Nityananda Prabhu, a daughter named Ganga and a son, Virbhadra. Two illustrious, empowered incarnations of the Lord. After Nityananda Prabhu departed from this world, the entire community of devotees, all the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu from all the various provinces, Vrindavan, Orissa, Bengal, South India, everyone accepted Janava Devi as the prominent acharya of our whole sampradaya. She resided in Kardaha. She delivered so many people there. She installed deities there that are still today. There is that historical event of the first Gaur Purnima festival in Keturi Gram, where Srinivasacharya, Shamananda, and Narottam Das Thakur arranged this festival. And the first person they invited was Janava Devi. They wrote personal letters to each devotee they were inviting. It wasn't like the invitation was on a printing press. They wrote a personal letter to each person and had an individual devotee who was assigned with delivering each message and reading it to those people. When Janava Devi received her message, Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu appeared to her from within her heart to express their pleasure that she go and preside at this festival. And there's a wonderful story in the Bhakti Ratnakar and the Narottam Vilas, which describes the details. But at the culmination of the festival, they were about to begin a kirtan. And it is described very clearly there that Janava Devi, she glanced, she gazed at Narottam Das Thakur. She is Nityananda's Shakti. That Shakti of Nityananda's ecstatic love. From her eyes, completely infused Narottam Das Thakur. Now I'm going to go back a little. When Nityananda Prabhu was still living with his parents in Ketari, Lord Chaitanya infused his ecstatic love in the Padma River and told Nityananda Prabhu, at the right time, you bring Narottam here to this river, and when he enters it, he will be infused with my love. So it was by the mercy of the love that Lord Chaitanya entrusted with Nityananda Prabhu that Narottam Das Thakur entered into his state of love. In fact, his complexion turned like Lord Chaitanya's golden form. And now here he is, after living in Vrindavan with Jiva Goswami. He returns to Ketari as a great acharya, and he's installing deities that have all self-manifested to him. And all the great associates of Lord Chaitanya who are still living in the world in Nityananda are gathered together for this festival. And he's about to sing this culminating kirtan in Janava Devi. He already had ecstatic love, but what did she infuse within his heart through her glance? Something that was historical. As Narottam Das Thakur sang with such ecstatic love, he induced that same love in everyone's hearts, and there was so much crying and separation from Lord Chaitanya that right in their midst, in a spiritually physical form, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, Gadadhar, Advaita, Srivas, who had all disappeared from this world years before, they all appeared. And all these other departed great souls, Pundarik Vidyanidhi and Haridas Thakur, Murari Gupta, Rupan Sanatan Goswamis, they all appeared again to dance with the devotees. It seemed like an endless dance that flashed in a moment. They were dancing and dancing together and crying and seeing each other. And suddenly, the Lord and all of his various incarnations and associates disappeared. And to the same extent, there was happiness. Now there was the pangs of separation. Now, Janava Devi, she was just sitting in her place watching this whole pastime that she herself inspired and empowered. Imagine her seeing her beloved Nityananda Prabhu manifest again, dancing in kirtan with the devotees after many years. She saw the pangs of separation in each devotee. And Janava Devi, she called Srinivasacharya and said, now we should celebrate the joyful festival of Holi. And they began the celebration. She gave life back to them. Yes, Kardaha, which is in the area of Panihati of Kolkata, was the home and the base of Janava Devi and Nityananda Prabhu. When we speak about a pilgrimage to Kolkata, we're not just speaking about this city, which is known for poverty and pollution. Even other holy places are, Vrindavan. At the time of the Goswamis, Vrindavan was such a magnificent natural forest. And when Srila Prabhupada resided there in the 1950s and 60s, it became a town, but it was surrounded. The river was Yamuna was so clean and pristine and wide, and so many beautiful trees and pastures and forests. And even when I was there in 71 and 72, it was so much like that. And now it's very much built up. But is there a difference? Externally, yes. Sometimes when I go to Vrindavan, I'm forced to remember it the way it was and feel separation from that. And in any type of way that we go deep into remembering Vrindavan, it becomes a blessing. But nothing could ever change the spiritual potency of Vrindavan Dham. And similarly, Kolkata, the place of Nityananda Prabhu and Raghava Pandit and Damayanti, the place Lord Chaitanya would come every time they'd cook, the place Lord Chaitanya would come every time Nityananda Prabhu danced, the place where Janava Devi presided over our whole movement, the place where Bhakti Vinod Thakur was educated and he left his body at the Bhakti Kutir, the place that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada was to a large extent raised and educated, given his first deity of Kurma at 7 years old, that came from the ground of Calcutta, and the place that Srila Prabhupada, our beloved founder Acharya A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, under a jackfruit tree near the river Ganges, he took birth in this world. And the place where he was, Subhavalas Prabhu spoke so nicely about Srila Prabhupada's mother and father. Their example, their loving care was so much infused with Krishna consciousness. Such fond memories Prabhupada would share with us about his growing up in Calcutta, Radha Govinda, the place where Srila Prabhupada preached with his godbrothers, the place where he received the order of his Guru Maharaj. For us, it was the most important instruction ever given. Take Lord Chaitanya's teachings to the world in English language. And from English, it's translated in practically every major language of the world. Yes, and in Calcutta, Srila Prabhupada boarded the Jaladuta and came back to start his first temple in India. Calcutta is not just a big, dirty city. It's a worshipable, holy place. And in honor of the mercy that is accessible in Srila Prabhupada's home, we are having our yatra. Srila Prabhupada said, my home is Vrindavan. My office is Mumbai, Bombay. And my place of worship is Mayapur. And Srila Prabhupada said the gateway to Mayapur is Kolkata. Just as the gateway to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's loving service for Radhanath Das Goswami was Nityananda Prabhu. So let us, whether we physically or just within our thoughts or our hearts, to honor Prabhupada's birthplace and the place of these wonderful pastimes. That is our yatra. I'm so honored to be with you. I'm so grateful. I pray that Srila Prabhupada and all of our beloved acharyas, their mercy and their grace and their blessings shower upon each and every one of you, your families, your ashram. Let us never forget the gift we received and not lose it in the petty disputes and fears and attachments that this world is always trying to distract us with. Let us take Prabhupada's instruction to chant Hare Krishna and be happy and give that happiness to each other and to the whole world. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Maharaj. So now we shall begin the end kirtan. I would like to request devotees of ISKCON NVCC to kindly be ready to respond in chorus. Maharaj, we can begin kirtan now.
If you can say a few more words, and I will come back within 2 minutes.
All right, Maharaj.
I am trying to be respectful to Mother Nature.
Hare Krishna. So very soon we shall be having our end kirtan, and we would like to hear from you about your appreciation of how we managed to show you the various pastime places of Srila Prabhupada in Kolkata. You can write on chat here. Many of you might not be knowing that our team of devotees from the media services, Radha Gopinath Media Services, how many of them? 10 of them were on the field visit. 5 were on the field visit. So we had Satya Gopinath Prabhu and who? Bharat Prabhu, Vijay Prabhu, Himmat Prabhu, and Baldev Prabhu, of course, from the Yatra Corps. And they actually were stationed in Kolkata for how many days? 5 days of intense recording. And some of you must be knowing that more than the recording, it is the rendering of the videos. Shankaran Prabhu is telling me that the yatra is nice, but the only thing missing online is the prasadam. Well, you could all cook some prasad, offer it to Prabhupada and the deities, and we can see you honoring after the kirtan is over. That is one thing we can do. But certainly, yes, even our kitchen team is missing the excitement of making 6,000 plates of prasadam ready every morning, 6,000 plates of feast, 8 course, 10 course feast sometimes ready every afternoon. So hopefully, Krishna willing, next year we will be having yatra as we know it. Thank you. Many of you are saying that awaiting a yatra in person. Yes, very much. You are echoing our views here. And for some of you who might not have been to any physical yatra, but have just come for the online yatra for the first time, so we wish you a special warm welcome. And we hope that from next year onwards, we begin our usual in-person yatra. So I'm thanking you all for those who are giving a response on chat. I am reading as I am speaking. And in case there is something which you would like us to improve, that also you can send. We have our team of devotees who are noting down your comments. Among the notables, Prabhupada disciples present today, who are today present today? Oh, Upananda Prabhu from Bhuvaneshwar, Mandakini Mataji, Manjwali Mataji as usual. So these are the prominent devotees. Anyone I'm missing? No. We had Bhakti Prem Maharaj from Ujjain, but now I'm not seeing him. So Radhanath Maharaj has just resumed his online presence, and we shall be having him now.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine.
Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine.
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine.
Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine.
Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Brinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Brinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Brinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Brinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Jai Prabhupada,
Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Jai Prabhupada,
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Jai Prabhupada,
Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.
Nithai Gaura Haribo, Haribo.
Gaura Haribo, 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 Haribo.
Nithai Gaura Haribo, Haribo.
Jai Gaura Haribo, 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 Gaura Haribo.
Nithai Gaura Haribo, Haribo.
गौर प्रेमानंदे राधानाथ स्वामी महाराज की, श्रीला प्रभुपाद की, कलकत्ता यात्रा की, गौर भक्त वृंद की, कलियुग पावन हरिनाम संकीर्तन की, श्री श्री गौर निताय की।
वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. So, Maharaj, thank you very much. I'll request our